Welcome guys, alright, here we go to another video lesson. Today we are talking about the post years, or the couple of years post the Revolutionary War. Mainly going to be talking about impacts that the War for Independence and the American Revolution as a whole had on not just the United States, but the world. So we're basically going to cover the end of the war and just overall big ideas that will come out of this area and this topic. So the objective, obviously, explain various ways the American Revolution affected society, both in the United States and beyond. And we're big brain question of the day. This is going to tie into our exit ticket today. Did the American Revolution affect more than just America? If yes, how did it change the world? If no, why? Keep that in mind as we go through today. Um, Keep in mind as well the battles and turning points of the revolution that we talked about yesterday. Yesterday was a lot of battle. Today's going to be a lot of, post all of that, post fighting. Less fighting today, more idea based discussion. So let's move forward. Title is Post Revolutionary War, and of course, our objective we already talked about. Let's get into the first key point. So, told you I'd talk about this more today, and here I am. So, Treaty of Paris of 1783. You got to write the date because there's a lot of treaties of Paris. So you have to keep in mind what the date is. Treaty of Paris 1783 officially ended the American Revolution and recognized the independence of the United States of America. That's really important. So I'll give you some time, pause here if you need it to get that slide, and we're going to move on. So, why is it so important for the United States to be recognized? There's a few reasons. All right. One big thing is that if you're not recognized as a nation and you're a new nation, other countries probably won't take you seriously, respect you, and overall may not want to deal with you because they may not want to upset the country that, say, doesn't acknowledge your independence. For example, the Texas Revolution. Right after Texas gets Santa Anna to surrender at the Battle of San Jacinto and all that good stuff, they're acting like if they're a republic, but Mexico doesn't recognize their independence. And because Mexico doesn't recognize their independence, when the United States will say, "Hey, Republic of Texas, why don't you become an independent? Why don't you become a state in the United States?" Mexico has that claim to be like, "You can't annex Texas; they're still a part of us." And this is going to lead to a conflict down the line that we will talk about. But it's just keep in mind it's very important to be recognized as an official country. So as a recognized country, the United States gets their own huge chunk of land and is officially a country. They basically get not Canada. They get the Northwest Territory right here and the southern parts that some people are already moving into. These will become states later on, but this is what the United States will look like in 1783 after the Treaty of Paris, all this purple stuff. So, peace treaty. A treaty is a peace document, right? Something that you sign, you agree, hey, fighting's over. It's called the Treaty of Paris because it was negotiated in Paris. This stuff is pretty self-explanatory, but got to make sure. So, the Treaty of Paris, 1783, not only officially ends the revolution, it officially makes the United States its own country with its own lands. Again, I can't stress enough, it's official. The whole world now sees the United States as its own unique country with its own land and its own leaders and its own everything. So that is officially stated after the Treaty of Paris. It's official. It's a thing. It's on the books. Everybody knows it. Official. It's kind of like you can say you graduated, but until you get that diploma, it's not official. Sort of a thing. Kind of. It's kind of a way to look at it. Not the best example, but it works. Now, moving forward, and again, I know I'm moving through these fast, but if you need time on them, just pause and we're going to move on. This is going to be a shorter video than yesterday's. Yesterday's I rambled about war for too long. On top of peace and an end to the conflict, the United States got a bunch of new land. This land was called the Northwest Territory. It is all in red. All the red is the new United States, right? But the Northwest Territory specifically is this like Ohio River Valley northern area. These southern areas, there's already a lot of settlers there, breaking the rules of the proclamation line. For a long time, Virginia and the Carolinas will claim a bunch of these, but eventually they will become, a lot of them will become their own colonies. Georgia will claim a lot of it as well. They'll become their own states in time. But as of right now, a lot of them are claimed by some of the other bigger colonies in the South specifically. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Key point 2. During and after the American Revolution, an increased awareness of inequalities in society motivated individuals and groups to call for the abolition of slavery and greater political democracy in the new state and national governments. So what does that mean? Well, in the United States, after the revolution happened, there were these ideas that were a part of it, right? The idea of all men are created equal, the idea of, God-given rights, all that. That's in the Declaration. And these ideas kind of shine a light on some of the problems that these places have. Now, in the United States, what does that mainly mean? It means that you're going to start to see more and more abolitionists come out. There's already some, right? Like we talked about the Quakers, but there's going to be more. And something I can't stress enough about abolitionists is they are a big deal. And I feel sometimes like we don't give abolitionists enough credit today because obviously it's, you're right to be against slavery. It's obvious now. But I can't stress enough that in 1783, 1785, and even earlier, if you're talking about like Quakers, being an abolitionist was not popular. It wasn't okay in society. Like, a good way to explain it would be take a look at yourself now and what you believe in and what you think. Try to imagine anything you believe in that, one, nobody else believes in, nobody else you know believes in. That, two, if you said out loud, hey, I believe this, you would be judged and persecuted for. And, like, think of it as in if you supported something and then you'd lose your job, right? Something to that effect. Or, like, you'd be outcasted. Or even beat up and bothered and hurt. Think about how many of those things, how many beliefs you have that are that bad or that not looked at, and then think about what abolitionists did. Because any abolitionist in this time, that's some of the stuff they're facing. It's a very unpopular opinion. It was the right opinion, obviously. But I can't stress enough how noble, or even maybe not heroic, but very noble it is to be an abolitionist and an outspoken abolitionist at that. And later on, when we get into like the William Lloyd Garrisons of the world, he's one of my favorite abolitionists out there. That guy was awesome. They're very brave for what they do. And, Frederick Douglass, can't say enough about him, Harriet Tubman, all these awesome people. And this is the early stages of that. You don't get to those people at that time if you don't have people starting to realize, hey, well, this is what America's founded on. And we're not doing that. Right? So let's talk about abolitionists a little bit. Like I said, it's the ideas. Even though Americans aren't really living up to them quite yet, it's the ideas that people want. It's a good idea, right? Hey, everybody's equal. So keep that in mind. And what the success of the revolution does is it makes it a law. Right? So now it's official. It's on the books. Hey, everybody's equal. It's law. It's the real thing. It's what the country is kind of based on. It makes it official. And some people, some are starting to realize the evils of slavery / like their hypocrisy starting to show, hey, how can we be a nation that's founded on the belief of all men are created equal while we have people in chains and enslaved? So it's starting to come out from there. And smaller scale, what you start to see as well, and this is a good one to write down because we're going to get really big scale for a second. So smaller scale, something to keep in mind. The American Revolution and those ideas of liberty and individualism and stuff start spreading to other colonies. You'll get less and less of the really strict Puritan, like you must be a Puritan, you must do this, and more open religious tolerance, especially after the Constitution's written. But even before that, you start to see people be like, hey, I don't want to do this. Like, I'm living here, but I don't want to have to be a, crazy Puritan. I don't want to have to burn women and stuff like that. Not that they burn women, but, Salem Witch Trials joke. Sorry. But I don't want to have to live like that. I don't want to have to be strict Puritan or nothing, And so you'll start to see that happen in the individual colonies, states, right? They're not colonies anymore. Now they're states. So keep that in mind as well. And now let's get really big brain for a second. Big topic. French Revolution. The French Revolution will start in 1789, only a couple of years after the Treaty of Paris is signed. Thomas Jefferson will help the French write out their declaration to the nobles. Jefferson's a big fan of the French Revolution, right? If you remember, like Hamilton, he wants to help the French out and stuff. But basically, what you need to know is that they're in part inspired by the Americans, their democracy, their government for the people, by the people. This idea really impresses them because by this time you'll have the U.S. Constitution, which is another shining beacon of hey, look at what they accomplished, right? And just know, we're not going to spend time on this. I could teach a whole class just on revolutionary Europe. the French Revolution was long, it was 10 plus years. It was violent. It ended with Napoleon Bonaparte being the emperor, so they basically gave up one absolute ruler for another, although I would argue that the second one is way more competent, and he kind of, you know, earned his position as opposed to a dice roll that, the dice roll that is the monarchy scale. But by the end of it, a lot of nobles and others lost their heads, and France has an emperor. So just keep in mind, though, that those ideas of government for the people, by the people, we all men are created equal, all that stuff really speaks to a lot of different European nations, particularly the French, who will overrule and chop the head off of the king that helps America get independence. So, last key point. In response to women's participation in the American Revolution, because they had one, we talked about the Daughters of Liberty and the bullet making and the sewing and all that stuff, as well as Enlightenment ideas and women's appeals for expanded roles. The idea, or an idea of Republican motherhood gained popularity. What does that mean? What is Republican motherhood? Well, we're going to talk about it. So, one thing to keep in mind, during this time, women are the primary educators in the household. How do kids learn to read? How do they learn what's right and wrong? How do they learn how their government works? What have you? It's women at home, mothers. And so, due to their increased actions during the revolution, women started to see their roles change a little bit. They started being given this responsibility, I hesitate to say task, because it wasn't like somebody said, here, do this now, but it was like this responsibility that women started being given, like societally, to teach the values of government and of how it works and what the young people's role will be in their government to the youth. Basically showing them the importance of American political culture. Like, here's what a president does. Here's what a representative does. Here's why we vote. Things like that. This idea comes forth when, as bad as it sounds, these dudes started to realize, hey, maybe our, wives and daughters are good for more than just doing wife and daughter stuff, right? And again, I apologize for wording it like that, but that's kind of the idea. They're like, maybe they can actually. And again, I apologize, but like, these guys are realizing that women have more to offer than just sitting around and being women. They have something to contribute to society. And you see that's, again, I can't stress enough, it's a baby step. But it is a step in the right direction, and it'll only grow more and more from here. We'll get into suffragettes, we'll get into the temperance movement and women's rights movements and all that stuff. But this is the first baby step towards that. So if you need time on that or any of the other slides, go back and pause. And now let's go into the exit ticket. Basically, how did the American Revolution impact the United States and the rest of the world? Include at least 3 examples. That is it for me, guys. This is on Google Classroom. Make sure you get it done. Have a great rest of your day. I will see you all next time in class.